Secretary McMahon talking about being able to obviously continue to dismantle the education department, but not in a way that completely gets rid of everything that it provides, sending it back to the states and allowing the states to really have a hands-on approach in governing the students or teaching these students. We've seen a lot of the failure in the classrooms, specifically with the education department. What are your thoughts on what you've heard so far?
Well, I think with our nation, $37 trillion in debt, every American ought to be asking, when it comes to the Department of Education, did it work? We spend more than a couple $100 billion a year. Obamacare federalized student loans to pay for Obamacare, enticing our children to collectively incur $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. Primarily, the result of that was driving up the cost of college. Have test scores skyrocketed together with the federal spending? So again, from my standpoint, the federal government ought to have almost zero role in education. That should be a state and local function, close to the students, close to their parents. You know, government close to government, where it's more accountable, more efficient, more effective. So again, I see very limited role of Department of Education in the federal government. Ronald Reagan wanted to abolish it. I wish he would have, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. But I'm all for President Trump sending back this function back to the states. Again, we're $37 trillion in debt. We can't afford to be wasting money ineffectively through the Department of Education.
Sure, point taken. While we've got you, I wanted to switch gears and talk about a major announcement we heard from President Trump yesterday. His plans for the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, imposing the 100% of the secondary sanctions against Russia. Here's more on what President Trump said yesterday.
I think this is a chance at getting peace, or it's just going to be the same thing. I have to tell you, Europe has a lot of spirit for this war. A lot of people, you know, when I first got involved, I really didn't think they did, but they do. And I saw that a month ago, and you were there, most of you, many of you were there. They really think it's a very, very important thing to do, or they wouldn't be doing it. Look, they're agreeing to, just, you know, they're paying for everything.
So speaking of, we learned yesterday that the U.S. would be making weapons, selling those to NATO, and then that being distributed to Ukraine. How does that play into your view of U.S. spending overall? Are you in favor of this weapons sale essentially by President Trump?
Well, first of all, I understand what President Trump has accomplished in his first term and the second term. He's literally refocused NATO. Got NATO countries to increase their own spending on defense so that they don't have to rely on America to come to Europe to defend them. They will defend themselves. So it's a significant difference in terms of his approach. And the fact of the matter is that President Trump, I think, has given Vladimir Putin every opportunity to achieve peace. And Vladimir Putin, like the Ayatollahs, didn't take him up in the offer. They better take President Vladimir Putin ought to take President Trump seriously. So I think he's lost his patience. And the good news is Europe is willing to defend itself and help Ukraine. Again, it's unfortunate. I wish Vladimir Putin would cease and desist. I mean, he is the aggressor here. He is the war criminal. But he ought to take President Trump's warning very seriously. I think President Trump has lost patience.
Yeah, finally, as we are all aware by now, speaking of President Trump, Sunday marking 1 year since the attempt on Donald Trump's life at a campaign rally that's in Butler, Pennsylvania. It turns out that the chart on the stage, which caused the president to turn his head at a quarter inch, actually saved his life and actually was provided by you shortly after last year. Is that the case? Can you elaborate on that?
Right. This is a chart that I was developing all the time. I was chairman of Homeland Security dating back 2015, and just so happened to be in Florida when he announced the Green Bay rally on April 2nd. And so I hitched a ride on Trump Force One. I had a bunch of issues I wanted to talk to him about. One of them was the border, and I showed him that chart. He loved it. I turned that right over to his comms director, who gave it to his person. He basically made a few modifications, used it that day with a group of law enforcement officials, and kept using it during the campaign. So the chart just shows how he secured the border and how President Biden blew it wide open, creating clear and present danger. So that's why he liked the chart. It was just so, pictorially, it showed exactly the success he had and the failure of the Biden administration.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.